Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Yelders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Buenas, this is Cisco Gallardo with the Healing Generations podcast, the Yelder edition. I want to thank all our longtime listeners. I want to say Happy New Year. I know it's a little late, but I just wanted to say Happy New Year. 2024. This is our first episode back, and we kind of have a special one. But before I get there, I just want to remind you, wherever you listen to your podcast, please leave a review. Please suggest somebody if you know somebody that's really in the community out there trying to heal the community in various ways. Maybe somebody has a compelling story regarding healing and building up our community. Let me know about it. You could go to our website and you could find my email there and just send us an email. That would be really good. Anyway, before we get going, I want to do the 4 directions because it's really important, right? We bring in our ancestors in a good way. So I want you to, in your mind at least, I want you to think about facing the east. And I want you to think about all your grandfather, your father, even your hood father, Maybe you got a hood dad out there that kind of looks out for you. I want you to think of your older brothers, your tios, your hood tios. I want you to think about, even your homies. Maybe you have a son, a nephew, maybe even a grandson. I want you to think about all the men in your life, all the things that they've been through, and all the blessings they bring, how they take care of us, how they do certain things. It's very important that we acknowledge them, and we want to invite them here with us. Because they're a part of that healing. It's a part of our community. And then as we turn to the left again and we start to face the west, we want to think about all our relatives in that center position. We want to think about our LGBTQ relatives and the things that they go through and the blessings. We want to honor them and ask the spirits to bless them in all, in every way that they can. We still continue to protect them and bless them. As we face that west direction, we think of all the women in our lives, our grandmothers, our mothers, our tias, our hood moms, our hood tias, our nieces, our daughters, our sisters, our partners. However it is, we want to think about all the women in our life, all the blessings that they bring. Even the struggles that they have for families, for their kids, for their community, for their home. We want to think about them in that way, all the blessings. And we want to remember those struggles so we can acknowledge them as we build. We want to make sure we're looking out the best we can for them and all that they bring. Then I want you to, as you turn around to the left, you're going to face that north direction. And I want you to think about all our ancestors that lived before us, the shoulders that we stand on today. We want to think about all our elders and our ancestors, how they fought for us, for school. They fought for the right for us to have a lot of things that we wouldn't even have. I don't think the young people understand what our ancestors been through. And our elders that are here, we want to acknowledge them as well and the struggle that they have. I want to remind you, especially during the winter months, it's hard for them, especially if they live in colder climates, We want to acknowledge the things that they go through, being lonely, feeling forgotten. We want to remember them, all the good things that they did and continue to do, and the wisdom that they carry on our behalf. And then we're going to move again to the left, facing the south. And as we're moving, we're also thinking about the spectrum of age in between, from the elders all the way down to the kids that are not even born yet, those babies that are not born. But they're coming. There's women pregnant right now and those babies are coming. What are we going to do to prepare for them? We want to acknowledge them, their little laughs, their crying. We want to acknowledge those little toddlers in our everyday life. We want to think about those children in the South, those little spirits, and the hope that they become for us, the hope that things are going to be all right. They're our next leaders in that way. We need to prepare them. So we think about them as toddlers, elementary school, middle school, high school, and into college, or whatever they're going to do with their life. We want them to feel good and feel sacred, and minimize the trauma. We want to foster their resiliency in all the good ways, I want to think about all our children, no matter what they are, no matter where they are, no matter how they are. We want to let them know that they're a blessing and that they're very sacred to us. And then we want to think about the sun and what the sun represents, That sun represents the hope. Every day is a new day. Even if we can't see it, we know it's there. It reminds us of all the beauty in life, and we need that sun for ourselves. We need that light, the animals, the plants, everything. We need it. And then we're going to go down and touch the earth, don unseen. We want to touch that earth and remember the beauty of Mother Earth, what she gives us, the food, the waters, the animals, all the way down until they say that last one is like the fruit of life, the sweetness of life. All the berries, all the things that we eat and we enjoy. We want to thank Don Unseen for that and do our best to protect her and do our best to be responsible enough to know what's going to hurt her and do what we can to save her. And, she's going to take care of herself. But the best thing we could do to honor our ancestors is try to live in harmony with her. And in that center, we also want to think about the Creator. Even if you don't believe in anything, I want you to think about just the mystery of life, how beautiful life is in its many forms, And for some people, they can't see that beauty. But that's what we pray for, that somehow, some way they can see it. They can see the beauty of life, the mystery of life, and that we just stay in awe of it, helps us stay strong and diligent and don't take it for granted. I want you to take a collective breath all the way in, all the way out. I'm burning the cedar here. Smoke's rising. Maybe you could smell it, It's that important to us. Whatever you have a chance, burn some sage, some cedar, some copal, palo santo, whatever's sacred to your people. I want you to use it that way. All right, I want to say a hello to everybody, and this episode is unique. So as we were coming up to the end of 2023, there was an email from our podcasting platform that said, they were going through some stats, how many podcasts we put out. There's like 36 countries, all the different states, that people are coming from, and this and that. And the number one podcast for the year, they gave us the top 5 or top 10 or whatever, but the number one is one that came from the Yelders edition. And it's one of our very special guests, because not only is she one of our, podcast interviewees and all that, but she's also a part of the Healing Generations Institute advisory panel. And she sits on that council, and she basically helps us in many ways. And I was very happy when I saw that her podcast was number one, because a lot of people told me about it and shared what it meant to them. And so we're going to replay that episode, but I happened to get a hold of Karina today. Her name is Karina Vega. And I'm going to give herself to introduce herself one more time, but I got a chance to bring her on the show just to give a little introduction, talk to her a little bit before we play the episode again. So with that, let me bring on Karina Vega.
Hi, Cisco. Thank you so much for having me back on. I super appreciate the recognition. It's so funny because as soon as you told me, I texted my parents and I told them. And it reminded me of another one of my dad's famous sayings that he always says, mi pecho no es bodega. Like, my chest is not a storage unit. So we can't tell anything ever. We cannot tell him any kind of secret or anything because he will spill the beans. So I couldn't help but spill the beans to my parents and tell them as soon as you let me know. And of course, I had to remember that, my dad has all of these sayings and all of these things. And to this day, Cisco, to this day, we took the kids to the Polar Express for Christmas. And we took my parents as well, and we didn't tell my dad where he was going because we were so afraid he was going to tell my kids. So even to this day, su pecho nos bodega. So thank you so much for the recognition. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad that everyone enjoyed the podcast. It's such an honor to be able to share my family's traditions and my family's legacy more than anything, because I feel honored to be able to carry that and to be able to pass it on to the next generation. And it just reminds me how important it is to continue to share those stories with my children as well.
Your episode, I think, hit a lot of people different because it talked about dichos, these sayings, these cultural sayings that our parents say, that our grandparents say. They're just little bits of wisdom, something for you to think about. So tell me, when you recorded it and you told your father about it, what did he think?
It's funny because I don't know if you remember, like, there's a few things where I wasn't, like, it's not your proudest moment as a parent and just things like that. So he was kind of uncomfortable a little bit with the things that were said. But I mean, it's just part of learning. When you know better, you do better, right? And so it's just part of what it is to be a parent. You're not always the best, but just being able to remember some of those things and knowing that, like, there's so many things that are in my head that just 100% just stay with me all the time. Like, even when I run a red light, he would always say, "Te fuiste, Marcelino." I don't know where it came from, and every time I run a red light, I could hear his voice in my head. And it just reminds me as Yelders, what a responsibility that we have to make sure that those voices in our children's heads are positive, are not negative. And there's so many dichos. I was thinking right now, like, he would always say, like, when somebody died, he would say, "Ya chicken go." Instead of saying the actual word, like the palabra "ya se chingó," right? He would say, sorry, for that bad word, but he would say, "Ya chicken go," because he would censor it for us, right?
Yeah.
Or he would say, "Ya bucket the kick it," which was kick the bucket, right? But he would say it wrong. But just so many things. And it just, it reminded me of what an amazing, childhood I had with all of these dichos. And again, not necessarily because I didn't have a good relationship with him, but I mean, he'd never had a daughter before, right? He didn't know what he was doing. So the way he communicated to us, there was always a lesson, there was always a dicho involved. But I think I turned out okay.
I would say you did. So when you first recorded and it came out and everything, was there any reaction from your friends or anybody that you knew?
There's a super funny story. So a girl that I work with that I didn't know, she had just started working like in another department. She shared it with her friend. So she shared it with her friend and she's like, "Oh, I had a clase, like a culturas class, like in college. And my professor shared this video and she's like, it's so cool. I want you to listen to it." So that friend listened to it and she's like, "Oh my gosh, it's Karina. She works here. Like, she works in the other department." And I totally felt like when, like, Selena está en la mall. I don't know if you know that movie from, like, when Selena's in the mall, like, she was so excited. Like, she came running across and, like, I don't know if that's really how it happened, but that's how it happened in my head, right? Like, she was so excited. And so it was just really cool to have that. And so many people shared it. So many people would, like, send me messages telling me, like, "We heard your podcast. It was so amazing." So it was just really, really cool. I felt like my 15 minutes of fame. It felt really, really, I don't know. It was just really nice to be able to share my life and the way I grew up and know that just, like, without thinking about it, you inspire others.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking a little bit of the time tonight just so that we could put a little introduction into this. So before we wrap it up, can you give anybody an update? How you doing? What's work been like? And you have any plans coming up?
So everything is okay. Everything's good. There's nothing. Well, ya ves que when you listen to the podcast, you know que nomás a ciertas personas le va mal. So a mí nunca me va mal. No, nothing ever goes wrong, right?
Yeah.
There's always every single thing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You ask to be stronger, so you're going to get situations come at you because you're asking for certain things, and they don't just happen. You never know why things happen a certain way, but you always know that there's a lesson in every losing opportunity. And there's so much to be said about 2024 and everything that we're going in. I'm hoping that I'll have the honor of recording another podcast with you as well. I'm hoping to continue the work that we do through everything, through all of the programs that we work together on, Cisco, just really continue to provide the opportunity to help others on their healing journey, help others really find who they were really meant to be before the trauma, before the pain, before all the hurt, and just continue the work. Just continue the work and be in the trenches and really help everybody find the best versions of themselves and who Creator really meant us to be before any of this. So I'm excited to partner with you on any project. You know, I'm always down to do any project with you, and just continue to grow, continue to thrive. And I really do want to be a good ancestor. So I know that work is happening now.
Well, I want to thank you again. So, relatives, we're going to go ahead and play the full episode coming up next. Again, I want to thank you, everyone. Please remember to, subscribe. Again, I can't say it enough. It really does help people discover the podcast. So here we go. So, the first question we have for you, can you share a little bit about yourself, your family, your background, and your journey up to this point in your life?
Yes, thank you, Cisco. Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored for the invite. So I am the daughter of Jose Luis and Yolanda Vega. They're both immigrants to this country. I, too, the first time that I was brought to this country, I actually was brought here illegally. But I am currently a school counselor working for the Coachella Valley Unified School District. And I do a lot of things here with the community. I've been with the Compadres Network and on my healing journey for about 8-9 years now. I am the oldest of 2 daughters. So there's 2 mujeres, my sister and myself. And my father was a campesino. He was a field worker his whole life. And my mom actually worked for the school district, and she worked for the school district longer than I was alive. So it was just a very interesting upbringing of kind of living in the 2 worlds, not only in like American and Mexican, but also a campesino and more of a blue collar worker. It was just a very interesting upbringing.
That's beautiful. So before we move on, I just want to hear, what does healing mean to you?
So it's very, very interesting. I always think of my dad. Anything that he taught us was always with the dicho. Like anything, like any problem that we had, he always had like a dicho or a story or a riddle or something. And I remember whenever anything would happen, I've always been very emotional. So like I'm a crier. Like I used to cry. There used to be this Folgers commercial when I was young, when the kid would come home from college and he would put like coffee for his mom. And I used to cry with that commercial. Like I always cried for everything. And my dad would be like, mija, and he would take me outside and he'd be like, miras el sol? And I'd be like, sí. And he's like, trata de parar que salga. Trata de parar, trata. Like try stopping it from coming out, from rising. And I'd be like, I can't. And he's like, well, that's the same thing with your problem. Like anything that happens, the sun is still going to come out. Mm-hmm. So why are you crying? And then he'd give me money. So then I was like, oh, if I cry, my dad's going to give me money, right? So I learned like really early on. And only because I feel like that was his way of making a connection with me. He really didn't know how to fix my problem, or he really didn't know how to tell me how to fix my problem. But he knew that it didn't matter what happened. The sun was still going to come out tomorrow. And, and then I had money for gas too. So it was kind of a win-win, But in that sense, healing to me really means that you can talk about things, things happen, you had a situation, but you don't have to allow it to define you. And I tell people all the time, I want to transform my pain. I want to transform it. I don't want to transfer it to my kids or to the people around me. And we see a lot of times people that are just transferring their hurt instead of sitting with it and transforming it. So for me, it really is about sitting with your pain, acknowledging it, and then just really being ready for it to leave.
Yeah, I mean, one of my homies, his name's Johnny Williams. He talks about his grandma used to tell him, this too shall pass. Yeah. That no matter what's going on in your life, you will get through it. Mm-hmm. And really, it's about kind of understanding the lesson you learn from it and how to not let it happen again if you can help it. Sometimes you're not in control of that. Early childhood trauma, stuff like that. We're not always in control of what happens to us, but it's one of those things. It's how we deal with it really sets us apart. So what are the life lessons that you learn from your culture, your family, your life experiences along the way that helped you in your healing and development? And you could include anything like music, art, advocacy, things that helped you with that process in your life. And how are you passing that on to your kids?
Yeah, there's so many things. And my prayer always is like when something is difficult, my prayer to God always is like, what are you trying to teach me? Right? What lesson am I not receiving that I have to go through this certain situation? I do believe that that's something that really helps me kind of ground myself. And I feel like it's an interesting upbringing. My father and mother used to be very religious, and all of a sudden we stopped going to church. And I kind of know why. My dad, he actually saw the pastor of the church, the priest of the church, drunk at like a bar there where we lived. And that really like did something to his faith. Like it really rocked his faith. So we stopped going to church. And I still kind of would go to youth group and I would go to these things, but I just remember him being so devastated, like so devastated. And unfortunately, it became something that was like his healing turned into coping, and the coping mechanism wasn't always the healthiest coping mechanism, right? So, he did drink and do things like that. And I just always remember I've never drank, like I've never, ever, ever. And I think it comes from just seeing how much damage that did to my family and to the people around me. So that was one thing. Like I always prided myself, and even though I got a lot of made fun of, and like I remember one time we were ditching because I wasn't a perfect child. I was a pampered child, not a perfect child. But I remember that they like brought me like a tetera with milk in it and cookies because everybody was getting wine coolers and just stuff like that. But my point is that I've always been someone who laughs. Like if it doesn't matter how much I'm hurting, how much I'm a payasa in every sense of the word. And it's funny because my relatives, my parientes, my ancestors were all, my tata, my grandfather, he was a titeretero and he carved puppets for the circus. So I feel like that entertainment, like that, the person on stage kind of has come from my family members. But the coping of really, 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 like, I don't want to say laugh it off because it's not, going away, but let's just have fun. Let's laugh. That's such a healing place for me. And I think it comes from my dad. Like everything was a joke. Everything was funny. Like there's so many jokes that he used to tell. And even like I feel like my dad was the original creator of the bad dad jokes, like so many jokes that he told. And I mean, I don't know if I can say a bad word, Cisco, but I want to say a bad word just because.
You can say we're open. This is the Yelder edition.
Yeah. My dad, anytime, and to this day, anytime anybody asks me, like, how are you? I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm great. I'm awesome. I'm amazing. And it's because my dad would always tell me, mija, if somebody asks you how you're doing, you always have to say you're doing good, porque nomás a los pendejos les va mal, right? And well, I'm not a pendeja, so a mí nunca me va a ir mal. And always to this day, like I always think of my dad, like when somebody asks me, ¿cómo estás? And bien, like estoy bien. And some days I really am, and some days I'm really not. But it's always that like nobody needs to know necessarily what I'm going through. That's a private healing journey that I have, with myself and my thoughts and my maestros and the time that I have for myself. But the people around me don't necessarily need to know, all of those things that are going around. And I do think that I got that from my upbringing and my parents kind of being in their own separate roles, but in leadership roles of like, we're here to serve. We're here to serve. Like you were brought to this world to serve others. You were brought to this world to find out what your gift is. And once you know what your gift is, you have to give it away. And I really, really, really believe that I was brought here to serve. Like I really believe that I was brought to serve my community, to serve the people that don't have the opportunities that I have, and to be that voice. And there's so much for me. There's so much healing in everything that I've gone through in the process of being able to help others. That for me, it really defines healing, and sitting with somebody's pain and helping them put it down for a little bit because it's too heavy. And I've learned that from my upbringing and my community. And I went to 9 different elementary schools.
Wow.
So I went to a lot of different things. So I was like quick to make friends. I like right away feel super comfortable with people because I didn't have a lot of time. So I was going to switch schools, So it's interesting that I feel that way. And I know so many people and I love so many people because of that upbringing that I just, I had to make friends quick, which actually worked out really good for me because now working at the district, there's so many people from so many different schools that I know, either as teachers and, they're my colleagues now, or just like the parents of kids that I know that I'm now serving. So it was pretty interesting growing up.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So tell me about how you do that with yourself and build upon those lessons with other people. Is there examples of how you do it within the school, the kids that you work with, or is it families? I know that the field of school counselor has changed. Counselors within schools have changed over the years. One of my friends just became a school counselor last year. He just finished his master's and now he's doing it. But how do you make that a part of your job, and how do you make that part of your life too? And what was your connection with La Cultura Cura that kind of really resonated with you?
So it's interesting. I feel like my life has always been like I'm just kind of an oddball. Like I'm not like everybody else. I'm not like I went to our schools and I was like too light to be Mexican, and then I went to like schools in Palm Desert, and then I was too Mexican to be American, and I just always been kind of odd. I remember I did this paper in college about like your identity and all these things, and I'm just like I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I'm super Mexican in some areas and super American in other areas. It's really interesting. My husband, he was born here. My husband was born here, and I was born in Mexico. But my parents, I want to say like 99.9% assimilated, and his parents didn't. So his parents, only spoke Spanish. They only had like carne con chile for dinner. And my parents, my dad, doesn't speak wonderful English, but both my parents speak English. And we would have sushi and Chinese food and just different things that my husband's parents didn't. So there's a lot of, like, I kind of just didn't fit in. Like, I just didn't fit in anywhere. And then it's crazy because I worked for a zoo for a very long time, and I had a job at the zoo.
Wait, you worked at the zoo?
Yes, I worked at the zoo. I actually got married at the zoo.
What?
That's where our wedding was. Yeah.
Wow.
But my job at the zoo was to bring animals to the students of the Eastern Coachella Valley. So it was a very like specific job. And that's what I'm at here in the district. I'm a counselor, but I'm a counselor for the school district, and I'm the only counselor for the whole school district that does what I do. So just very like being able to find that niche. Like, what are you good at, and how can you use it to serve others? Like, that's always kind of been my thing. And I never was a big animal person, but I love talking to people, and people love animals. So it was just a really, really good way. And there's so many stories. I always tell the story of the tarantula. So the tarantula, it actually has to break its exoskeleton in order to grow.
Wow.
Like, it has to break its skeleton in order to grow. And I kind of feel like that's what happens to us. We have to go through this pain, through this like breaking of our outside. Like, we have to challenge everything that we know and break through so that growth can actually happen. And a lot of times, because it's uncomfortable, because we don't like it, because it's painful, we just kind of stay the same. And it's crazy. There's a saying that says that people die when they're 30. They're just not buried till they're 85.
Mm.
And I feel like that's kind of like what happens to tarantula. The tarantula, if it doesn't break out, it dies. It doesn't grow. And it kind of happens to us as people. We just go and we don't necessarily grow anymore. We end up dying. We end up not like living the life that we were intended to live because we're stuck. And so for me, the opportunity for what I do here to be able to serve my community, to be able to serve others, is really in that lesson of who are you supposed to be? Like if you were allowed to continue to grow, if you had the support, the love, everything that you needed to grow, who would you become? Like if fear wasn't your first thing that you thought of, if failure wasn't an option, if you hadn't, got stuck in your susto, what would you have become? And it's so crazy because sometimes I talk to people that are like 18, 19, and they're like done. They're like, yeah, well, this is it. This is my life. And there's so much more out there, and just really helping them understand and see, like, you're just stuck. Like you're stuck in that susto. You're stuck in the belief that like, this is it. This is all you have. And just really teaching them that there's so much more out there. And even if it's with stories, I remember I used to be a teacher before I became a counselor. And here in the Valley, we have some, they're called papalotes, like the windmills.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a student, and we're sitting on the bus, and he's like, teacher, agárrese. He's like, hold on. And I was like, what's going to happen? Like, what's happening? And he had never been past the windmills. In his whole life, he'd never been past the windmills. And he literally believed that they were going to push us back. And just like, I was like, wow, like there's so much out there. There's a huge entire world. Like all he had ever done was go to Food for Less and back. And just really like helping anybody see that there's so much more. I mean, this is a specific example, but there's so much more. Like even some of our kids that go off to college, they only get as far as college and back. You know what I mean? And just like really helping them see that there's so much more. And your pain, your trauma, your hurt doesn't define who you are as a person. And you shouldn't let it define you as a person. And I think those are all the things that, like from my upbringing of just like I always remember that Selena clip where, you're not Mexican enough and you're not American enough. And that's why we have frijoles, because we have, our strength to help us push forward, because that really is, it ultimately, our culture is a very strong culture. We come from people that are very strong and very powerful. And I always remember Maestro telling us, like, stand in your power. Every time you speak, you need to stand in your power and don't be afraid of the voice you have. And those are teachings that I teach my own kids, my own children. My 8-year-old has affirmations that she does every morning. Soy fuerte, soy valiente, soy inteligente. I'm strong, I'm beautiful. And she added, y soy hermosa. Like she added the hermosa part. But just really like the voice in your head needs to be stronger. And if you don't have a positive voice, then you need to create a positive voice for yourself. And those are kind of like upbringings. Like every time I come to a stop sign, I always think of my dad, because he would like try to like brake on his side of the car, even though he didn't have a brake. He'd try to brake on his side of the car. And then when he played 21, because he is a gambler. He's a gambler. He paid 21. So whenever the card would go over like the 21, he would say, "Te fuiste, Marcelino." Like that would be like a quote. So every time that I do like a California stop, like a rolling stop, I always think of my dad, "Te fuiste, Marcelino." So I think of this. So I have all of these phrases in my head of my dad. And I always think like, and I know, I mean, gracias a Dios, my papi's still here with us. But I always think like, man, like I want my kids to have that positive voice of their mom wherever they go. And it's not a negative voice. It's not a like, no puedes. It's a sí puedes. It's a, creo en ti, tú puedes kind of voice. Mm-hmm. And that really is something that culturally, and it's so crazy, Cisco, because I was always so drawn to the calaveras. Like so drawn, like I wanted to have them, but my mom would be like, no, eso es del diablo. Eso no es bueno. Because her belief was that they was bad. Like it was like more like brujeria and not necessarily curanderismo. And so learning about the difference and really like being so attracted to that and being so, I understand now where that attraction comes from and why I had such a like curiosity a little bit, because my mom said no. And when your mom says no, you want to do it. Yes. But a little bit because I know how connected it was to my culture, even though my mom had been disconnected from it. Thanks to the Compadres networks, a lot of that has been reconnected again.
Yeah, that's a beautiful lesson. I mean, I hear you with that. You definitely have to grow, Like I even see that in my own life. There's things that I did in my 20s and lower that I still, the way I dress, the music I like I didn't really get too far out of my box, you know what I mean? And I think you're definitely right when it comes to you have to grow, you constantly have to. On other aspects of my life, I've been a lifelong learner and I've seen that. I mean, that's a valuable lesson. And the teachings of your dad, you got to write those dichos down and create a little booklet so that they can have it and share it with their kids, and how it's going to keep going in that way, special memories for your family and for your family culture. I mean, that's the beautiful thing I think about these ways is that even though we're a part of a bigger culture, in the Mexican American community, but we also have our individual culture. Mexico's a big country, it depends on where you're from, and you bring things from your, the city or the village or the rancho, wherever you came from, you bring a little bit to wherever you're at in your family and stuff like that. I think that's beautiful because people have to create their connections to their culture in a good way. I mean, that's part of La Cultura Curas, creating a healing culture. And that might work and look differently for certain people. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I really appreciate the way you kind of outlined it and the way you shared it and the way you've grown with it. That's it's a beautiful teaching, with that, and, that's why I think you're on our advisory council. You do have a lot to offer, and I really appreciate that. So what counsel and advice would you give to others, other Yelders, other people that are coming up, other teachers, other counselors? Because I think in our position in our life, I'm approaching 51 this year, and life's changed for me in a lot of different ways, and I'm kind of learning to accept it. Throughout our lives, we have different roles to play. And I know I'm moving in a different role. I was at this event with a lot of young people, 20 somethings, 30 something. And I realized I'm one of the senior guys here, or people. And it's a different role, the way they talk to you, the way they want wisdom, the way they want certain things. And, it's a different role for us. And so what do you think about that? And what advice would you give to those people that are in that earlier phase of being a Yelder and they're trying to grow, they're trying to figure out life in that way? What advice would you give them?
It's so crazy, Cisco, because there's so many things that are coming into my mind. I remember I was really, really nervous. I was telling B, so B is one of my maestras, and definitely find people that you want to emulate your life after. Do they have the income that you want? Do they have the life do they want? Do they have the morals, values, and principles that you want? Because if they do, then those are people that you need to listen to. If they're somewhere that you don't want to be, maybe take their advice with a grain of salt, right? Because whatever it is that they're doing, that's the perspective that they're going to give you. So those are always like my three things. Do I want the life that they have? Am I aligned with the morals, values, and principles that they have? And do I want the income that they have? Those are kind of like the things that I think about all the time. And so B is one of my maestras. And I remember I was just a mess, and I'm sitting in her office and I'm crying. And she's like, Mija, by the time you're 40, life is going to be really different once you turn 40. Like, you're just going to have this epiphany and, all these things. And I'm like, B, well, I have 3 days. Like, I don't think I can get my life together in 3 days. I don't think I can get my life together in 3 days. And so there's so much to be said about the people that you surround yourself with, your associations, the people that you associate with, and what they're doing and the life that they're wanting to lead. Like right now, it's really important to me to surround myself with people that are family oriented. So I want to make sure that that's something that, do they believe in spending quality time with their children? Do they believe in those things? So when I think about what I needed when I was, at the place where I was just starting off in life, I've seen so many educators be chewed up and spit out by our system, right? And at some point they came into the education world wanting to change the world. And at some point they lost sight of that because they tried and they tried and they tried and, their ideas kept getting shot down, or because they were used to the point where they just needed to set boundaries and they couldn't, stay at school until 7 o'clock every night and just those things. But more than anything, what I think about is start with yourself. Make sure that you're okay. Make sure that you're putting in your survival skills. Make sure that you're doing what you need to do to really be your authentic self. There's a few books I think of. Obviously, the 4 Agreements, being impeccable with your word, having palabra. And again, I think of my dad. If it's 3 o'clock in the morning and the light is red and it doesn't change for 20 minutes, my dad's sitting there waiting for the light to change. Like, he won't ever take the light. Like, he's a man of palabra. And I think of him all the time. But just having your understanding of what your morals, values, and principles are, and just being really solid with that and saying, like, I can't follow someone or I can't take advice from someone who doesn't have my same morals, values, and principles. And I remember when we were first married, my husband would be like, why don't you let your sister do that? Why don't you let your sister do that? And I'd be like, because God's not going to ask me, what did your sister do? God's going to ask me, what did you do? And that's always my place. Nobody's going to ever ask me like, hey, well, why did you do that? Oh, I did it because Cisco did. I'm not responsible for Cisco's life. I'm responsible for my life and the gifts that I've been given. And so I always think that if I were to meet Creator tomorrow and he would ask me, what did you do with the gifts I gave you? Would I be proud of my answer? And I always think about that. And it's something that you need to think about, even if you're young, if you're old, wherever you are. If you know that you're not living the life that Creator created you to live, then what are you going to do to change that? And it's not just when you start your career, it's when you continue your career. And if you're in a place that you're not happy, then what are you going to do? There's a book called Your Oxygen Mask First. It really is so important. You have to take care of your survival first. Because if you're not in a place, how are you going to do that for your kids? Like even in the plane, it says put your oxygen mask first and then help somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're pouring from an empty cup, whatever that is that you're giving is empty too.
Exactly.
It's almost like a virus. If you have a virus, you're going to pass the virus. Like you have to be healthy in order to be able to do that. And that's always my advice to educators. Number one, you don't know it all. So allow yourself to be taught, allow yourself to listen, allow yourself to lead. And God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a purpose. We should be listening more than we should be talking, especially when we're younger. Especially when we're younger. Like there's so much that we can learn from people, even people we don't like. We can learn from people we don't like. We can maybe learn what we don't want to be like, but it's still an opportunity to learn. And really, really ask yourself, is what I'm doing right now taking me to the life that I want to lead? Not the life I want to live, the life I want to lead. Because a lot of people live their life and a lot of people lead their life. And there's a big difference between the two. So is what I'm doing right now going to take me and lead me towards the life I want to lead? And sometimes that's a hard question. Sometimes that's a hard question because there's so much that we don't want to face or there's so much that we don't want to deal with. And we tend to talk about people instead of talking to people. And that really, really, really causes us to not be able to be our authentic selves because we're just going based off of like hearsay and what we think people are thinking or we think people are this, but just really, really, really be genuine to yourself and who you want to be authentically and be genuine to the people that you're serving and allow them. This is always something that's really hard. Kind of, you almost want to be like bumpers, like in bowling. You want to kind of let them be everywhere in the between, but you don't want to let them fall off the edges, you know, because you don't want them to be who you want them to be. You want them to be who they want to be, but with some guidance and encouragement, you know, along the way. So my biggest advice is seek spiritual counsel, seek emotional counsel, have maestros, have, you know, people that are going to be authentic with you. And just be able to say, you know what, Cisco, I love you. And I really think that you're drinking too much, or I think you're doing this too much, or, you know, maybe you want to listen more than you're talking, or maybe because those people that are comfortable enough to be like, hey, you're messing up are the people that really love you. And we tend to block those people out of our life because we don't want to hear that. Like, we don't want to hear that accountability. We don't want to hear that. And we're like, oh, they're being super negative to me or this, but really, 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 they're helping you be accountable. Like those are the people you want in your life. The people that kind of almost on the verge of making you uncomfortable, but they're really calling you up and saying, hey, this is not who you were created to be. I know that you have more in you than, you know, than what you're giving the world. And let's help you get to that point. I think that's the biggest thing. Find people that make you uncomfortable. Maestro makes me uncomfortable. And those questions those challenging questions, you know, and I don't mean uncomfortable like in a bad way. I mean uncomfortable like, oh, like I don't know the answer to that. And it's okay not to know the answer. It's okay not to know what it is, but to know that you want to find the answer. Like that's the part I think is super valuable. Because a lot of times we get into the rooms and people want to tell you how much they know. I want to know people that know how to find the answers, not people that are going to tell me the answers.
Yeah, that is a critical point, right? I mean, what you said about Maestro, I feel the same way because he's connected in a way and he asks very thought-provoking questions where you're like, oh, I don't know. You know, I never thought about it from that perspective and that's kind of what I feel like maestros do in a good way is they kind of spark a thought, you know, like what if this was like this? What would it be like? And how did your trauma in your life really disconnect you from what your real sacred purpose is? A lot of times people trip out on that. They rather do just enough to live, but they're not actually living. And I think that's one of the things I hear from you is, you know, find out if you want a better life, create it for yourself. Yeah. And, you know, it's going to take time. It's going to take small changes, but always wanting better, always trying to do better is always a good thing. It always brings growth. And I know people do get stuck, especially Yelders. I feel we get stuck, right? Maybe we're making decisions. Maybe we're trying to get ourselves in a position to have a better life, but you always have to be working towards something. And that takes a lot of vulnerability, which is hard. You know what I mean? Well, trust is one of those hard things for us, you know? So, man, I really appreciate your perspective, how you lay things out. You're definitely a maestra for young women and for people in general. I feel like hopefully within the district, people are leaning on you, those younger counselors, to learn, you know, because you're not going to be here forever. And you want whatever you bring, somebody else could bring it in their own unique way. You know what I mean? I learned a long time ago, even with me, when I was young, they used to put a lot of pressure on me. But also elders used to tell me, you know, help create the people behind you. Help them be the best that they could be. So when you're ready to move on, there's somebody to fill your shoes or wear their own shoes. You know what I mean? Fill yours and more. And that's always critical for us. And I feel like anybody listening, you know what I mean? Like, take the time, learn, get your people, get your maestros, maestras, get your whatever spiritual guidance you might need. You know, look for it, seek it out, and don't be afraid to try new things. I think that's important, you know? So I just want to thank you, Karina, for just doing all this work that you've been doing over the years, you know? In the future, I definitely want to bring some of this, the Healing Generations work to the Coachella Valley. I think it's needed, you know? I had somebody reach out to me about, hey, what's going on over there? And so I'm going to connect them your way, just so you know about that, because I think it's important, you and B, you know?
Yes, for sure. You made me think of all of the stories that my dad had said. We can fill a whole podcast just on things that he's taught me. But I remember he used to tell me there was a rio where we lived, and he said that some people scare you to not swim in the river, right? You know, because they're going to drown, right? And I feel that's kind of how life is. You can be afraid to swim in the river, and he'll be like, "Don't be afraid. Just know that there's undercurrents." Just know that there's undercurrents and that you can get caught up. Don't let it stop you from swimming, but trucha, you know, like be aware that there's undercurrents. And I just kind of feel like that's how life is. You don't want to be too scared to swim in the river because, you know, it's pretty fun swimming in the river. But just be aware that there's things that will stop you and that'll, you know, that might hold you back, that might try to drown you, literally. But don't ever be afraid. Don't ever be afraid. Just be strong enough, be wise enough, be smart enough. Have people with you at all times that can help you if you do get caught. To me, that's such a metaphor for life. Don't be scared. Swim in the river. Just know that there's going to be, you know, all these things. There's going to be all these, you know, things that people want to impose on you, and just don't let it. Just surround yourself with people that are going to keep you happy and healthy and strong, and that are going to help you not just survive, but live your authentic life. So thank you for having me on. I super appreciate it. Anything that you need, ya sabes, we're always here for you. Anything that you need.
All right. Thank you again. Is there any last thoughts or any way people could get in contact with you if they're inspired in any way? You know, I don't know if you're willing to share your Instagram or anything like that, or Facebook. I'll leave that up to you. But, you know, of course, if there's a way for people to, you know, to get inspired, you know, and I want to remind people, you know, maybe there's somebody like Karina in your life that, you know, you think we should share their story, you know, reach out to us, because that's part of it, you know, is how do we tell these stories about healing and resiliency that could really, you know, help inspire us to keep doing what we're doing or change our current situation. Because I know a lot of people who reach out to me, you know, that just say, you know what, where do I start? I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, for sure. My Instagram is actually my married name, which is Sustaita. So it's Kari, it's Kari, Sustaita _. So it's Kari Sustaita _ And yeah, for sure. And it's so funny. The other day, somebody sent me a message on Instagram and they're like, I need some help. And somebody said to reach out to you. And I was like, sure, you know, how can I help you? And she's like, there's a trash can outside of my classroom that hasn't been thrown out, right? So then I'm like, okay, you know, what school are you at? Well, she ended up being at a school that's not even in our district. but you know what's funny, Cisco? You know what's funny? I actually knew somebody from their school, and I actually got her trash thrown out.
Nice.
But yeah, like, I definitely want to make sure that people know that I'm here to help, that I definitely advocate, you know, for just a lot of different things. And really, more than anything, challenging what the society expectation is versus doing what's right and what's proper and what's actually going to help you live a better life, like a more fulfilled life. So yeah, it's Kari Sustaita, Karina Vega Sustaita on Facebook. Anything that I can do, anything that I can help, I definitely love More than anything, I love to serve my community and just really be a voice for the people that just are not ready to use their voice yet. I don't want to say voiceless because they have a voice, they're just not ready to use it yet. So anything that I can do to help, you know that I'm just a phone call or a text away.
I appreciate that immensely. I just want to thank all our listeners again. Please share the podcast, introduce it to people. And of course, I welcome any feedback, positive or negative. That's how we get better. I'm not perfect. I'm doing the best I can myself and the rest of the hosts, we definitely want to grow. And, we like to make partners wherever we can, So reach out to us. Again, the National Compadres Network.org. You can find us on the web, on Facebook, all the socials, find us and give us some feedback. I really appreciate that. Again, I just want to tell everybody this healing journey takes time, takes commitment. It takes willingness to dig deep sometimes and unpack things in our life that affected us, that keep us with susto, keep us with this fear for us to move on. And that's why we utilize our medicines, or utilize our teachings from our culture, like the Olin, that this sacred movement. If we could work on that and really try to keep ourselves moving, no matter what comes our way, and it's all right to ask for help and guidance and all those things, and be useful for people. So with that, I want to just thank everybody one last time and say until next time, a rato en palabra.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.